My name is Catherine Brandon, and I lived through the reigns of King Henry VIII, his son Edward, and his two daughters Mary and Elizabeth. I was born in March 1519 to William Willoughby, 11th Baron Willoughby de Eresby, and his second wife Maria de Salinas, and I was their only surviving child. My mother had travelled from Spain to the court of Henry VIII with his first wife Katherine of Aragon to serve as her lady-in-waiting, and she became a lifelong friend to the Queen. After Catherine's marriage to King Henry VIII was declared unlawful in 1533, my mother was ordered to leave Catherine's household and not make any attempt to communicate with her. When the Queen's health deteriorated, she begged permission to visit her, but was denied. On the 5th of January 1536, having once again been refused permission to visit, she forced her way into Kimbolton Castle to see her friend and mistress. 2 days later, Katherine of Aragon died in my mother's arms. It seems His Majesty King Henry was also fond of my mother, perhaps appreciating her devotion to his first wife, as he named one of his warships the Mary Willoughby in her honour. My father was the largest landowner in Lincolnshire and had been married before he met my mother, but other than that I know very little about him, as he died when I was only a child. On my father's death and aged just 7 years old, I inherited the barony. My wardship fell upon King Henry, and I was considered one of the greatest heiresses of my generation. 2 years later, my wardship was sold to Charles Brandon, the Duke of Suffolk, best friend and brother-in-law to His Majesty. The Duke and Duchess were always kind to me and treated me as one of their own. I enjoyed living with them, as their children Francis, Eleanor, and Henry were of a similar age to me, and soon I was betrothed to their son. When the king's marriage to Katherine of Aragon was declared unlawful in May 1533, the Duke was delegated to inform Katherine that she was no longer queen, move her household, and dismiss some of her servants, including my mother, which he found distasteful. However, he could not defy the king who had raised him to his current position. Our household was then expected to attend the coronation of His Majesty's new wife, Anne Boleyn. The Duke's wife, Princess Mary, had a poor opinion of Mistress Boleyn, and my respect for her, plus my mother's close friendship with the former queen, led me to have little opinion of the Lady Anne too. However, in late May 1533, we packed up our belongings and travelled to London to obey the king's summons. By now I was 14 years old, and although I was not pleased to witness the Lady Anne's coronation, my horizons and prospects were broadened when I saw and met some of the greatest people in the country, and I cannot deny the event itself was spectacular. The celebrations lasted 4 days, and included banquets and jousts. London sparkled with more cloth of gold and silver than I had ever seen in my life, and the new queen travelled up the River Thames to the Tower of London in a flotilla of barges, which must have been 4 miles long. Almost immediately after the coronation, the Duchess Mary returned home to Westhorpe due to her ill health. The Duke and I stayed in London with Francis, Eleanor, and Henry, continuing to enjoy the festivities and enabling the Duke to secure a good match for his eldest daughter Frances to Henry Grey, Marquess of Dorset. However, our stay in London ended abruptly when we received word that Mary's health was deteriorating. We rode hard day and night to reach her, but failed, and the woman I had come to regard as a mother died on the 28th of June 1533. At her funeral I acted as one of the chief mourners. It was a very sad day for me, but little did I know how this event was about to change my life forever. What happened in the following weeks happened swiftly. The Duke, now a widower, quickly offered me a proposition. Instead of marrying his son, as intended, he asked if I would be willing to become his wife instead. When he first suggested it, I was surprised, not because of the swiftness of his proposal or the difference in years between us. Early remarriage and marriage between youth and age were commonplace, and I had been brought up to believe that making a good marriage was important and the best option for a young woman. I was surprised because the Duke of Suffolk, although now in his late 40s, was still popular amongst the ladies at court. Plus, he was the king's closest friend, which meant he could marry any lady of his choice. So why did he want me? I believe his decision was based on many factors. Firstly, I was young. I believe the Duke liked the idea of marrying a teenager and showing her off at court. Plus, my youth could only improve his chances of fathering more sons. His only son, Henry, was ailing, and the Duke needed a male heir to inherit his titles, lands, and estates. With his son's health deteriorating, it would be foolish to marry me to Henry, because if he died, I would keep all my estates, lands, and the barony inherited from my father until I remarried, and it became the property of another man. To your modern standards, these facts may seem vulgar and grasping. However, these were regular considerations when deciding upon a good Tudor marriage. It is true the Duke himself would benefit greatly from our marriage, but so would I. The Duke was always kind to me, and I was flattered by his advances. He was a good man and a good captain. His loyalty to the king had dramatically increased his status, and by marrying him I would greatly increase mine. In Tudor England, the nobility were divided into several ranks, and dukes and duchesses were only one rank lower than royalty. I could increase my status and that of my children by marrying the Duke. So on the 7th of September 1533, that is exactly what I did. With my new title came new responsibilities. At only 14 years old, I was no longer the ward of one of the most powerful and respected men in England. I was now his wife, a duchess, the mistress of his household and stepmother to his remaining children, some of whom were older than myself. As a wife, it was my responsibility to support Charles's children from his previous marriages, and to produce male heirs who could inherit the Duke's title and estates after his death. This I fulfilled when I presented him with a healthy son, only 2 years after our marriage. The child was named Henry. His Majesty the King was present at his baptism and stood as godfather. In 1537, 2 years after Henry's birth, I gave my husband a second son, who we named in honour of his father. As mistress of the Duke's household, I was expected to organise the day-to-day running of it. I organised the servants, ensured our workers were paid, and planned the meals. The number of dishes someone was entitled to at their dinner table was a status symbol regulated by statute. A duke, like Charles, was entitled to have 7 courses, and I had to ensure the ingredients were bought, paid for, prepared on time, and in the most elegant and flamboyant manner. Finally, as a duchess, it was my duty to support my husband, and when not residing in Lincolnshire on the king's command, attend court and serve as lady-in-waiting to the king's wives.